Once a giant, always a giant. For me, it's only a giant.
What's going on YouTube? Diggy546. Definitely hit that subscribe button if you're new. Like the video if you like the video. And I won't tell if you click that bell. But let's go ahead and get into this. So I'm going to be putting together a ton of lists like this for pretty much every position. But I'm going to start off with receivers because this is the class that I've studied the most. The Giants obviously have the biggest need at receiver. And I think there's this receiver class is just really deep. It's really good. So I'm going to be giving my top 5. So without any further ado, let's get straight into this. At number 5, we have Kadarius Toney. Now, Kadarius Toney is a wide receiver out of Florida. He's 6 foot, 194. He had 10 touchdowns, 984 yards. Pretty much played that full season. And he's always open. He has constant separation. He's probably the shiftiest kind of player. Definitely the shiftiest route runner. The most like highlight worthy routes. Definitely by far in this draft. I mean, if you saw him at the Senior Bowl, he was open all day. He was breaking people's ankles all day. I think he actually tore someone's ACL in the open field with one of his jukes. So he is an absolute nightmare as far as going side to side. And he's going to be a problem in the NFL. Some more things about him. He can play outside. He can play inside. He's got some solid long speed, but that's probably his biggest weakness is the long speed. He doesn't necessarily have that explosive, 4.3, low 4.4 type of speed. I think he's a 4.5 guy when I look at him on tape. But a 4.5 guy can get down the field and get open and win on those deep routes. So he definitely can still make those big plays in spots, but he's not going to be someone who's a threat every single play to go the distance. I don't think that about him, but I do think that he'll constantly be open, and I think he'll probably be best suited as a slot receiver, as an explosive slot receiver. Mind you, a slot receiver is not a bad thing. Chris Godwin is a slot receiver, and he is always open, and I think he can be a number 1 receiver in the league. And then some more things that might be hesitations for picking him. He wasn't the number 1 option at Florida. We all knew that it was Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts is a monster. Kyle Pitts is an animal from a different planet. And Kadarius Toney just wasn't that at Florida. So that's one thing to consider. And then the other thing to consider, he's not, it's one of those 6'1", 6'2" receivers. He's just at 6 feet, and that might be generous. He might be a little bit under that. But I don't think his size will be that much of a problem in the NFL. It's just more about the speed and the fact that he hasn't proven that he could go out and be bracketed and be that number 1 option. But looking at a pro comparison for him, this was a comparison I thought about for a while. I thought of Harry Douglas, but I think a good comparison for him is Percy Harvin. And not necessarily the speed. He does not have the top end speed or even, the speed at all of Percy Harvin. But in the short area, the lateral agility, the quickness, the ability to juke people out in the open field, he has that 100%. Percy Harvin's 5'11", 185, so not that much different. I mean, about 10 pounds different and an inch shorter. Really shifty. They both went to Florida, and I think that's a solid thing. They're pretty similarly built, except he doesn't have that concussion problem, but he does not have the big play upside that Percy Harvin does. But nonetheless, Kadarius Toney, I think, is the shiftiest guy in this draft, bar none. And that's why he's at number 5 on my list. So at number 4, we have Rashod Bateman. Rashod Bateman, man, he's been shooting up draft boards. He just ran a 4.39. We don't know how legit that time is, but I do see that speed on tape. The thing is, he's a smooth route runner. He's probably the best. It's really tough because we got a lot of great route runners. But Rashod Bateman is a very polished route runner. He runs the entire route tree. He plays in Minnesota, which is a school that doesn't really play against the top competition, but you see he has all the tools. People try to say he doesn't have the tools at the line of scrimmage. I think otherwise. I think he does have that line of scrimmage power, release, variety of different releases that he can use to get off the line. And he's a long speed guy. I think he definitely is someone who's always a threat to be able to take one of those go routes, go down the field, and, be able to turn that into a big play. Some other things. He has some really strong soft hands, catches the ball on the run, always catches the ball with his hands. That's what we love to see. You don't want to see receivers, going across the middle trying to catch everything with their body. First off, that's going to slow you down. And second of all, it shows that they're not comfortable catching the ball. The receivers that make those highlight plays, they're comfortable catching it with just their hands. And Rashod Bateman can do that all day, every day. He's great after the catch. A lot of people compare him to Keenan Allen. I think he's a little bit different than Keenan Allen. Moving on, he did it with little to no help at quarterback. His quarterback will not be playing in the NFL. I don't think so. If he does, then he's not. He's going to be a back end of the roster kind of guy. But I mentioned Keenan Allen. Let's go ahead with this comparison. My comparison is Allen Robinson. First off, Rashod Bateman is 6'2", 209. Allen Robinson is 6'3", 209. They have similar builds. They're both big receivers who are surprisingly agile, surprisingly great route runners. And they're both a threat to take those screen plays and make plays with those. They can go downfield, make those highlight type of catches, and they can use their big body to shield people off and make, more contested catches. Rashod Bateman might, end up growing that extra inch and be 6'3", but their body types are very similar. And I think he can be an Allen Robinson type of player, which is a perennial Pro Bowler and definitely a type of receiver that a team that needs one will be looking for. I expect Rashod Bateman to go a little bit before Kadarius Toney. I expect him to go anywhere from 11 to probably about 19. If he's there for Washington, I can't see Washington passing on Rashod Bateman. He is an elite prospect that just played on a team that didn't play against the best competition. And now we're in the land of the big three. The big three, we all know who they are, but we'll unwrap this as we go along. Coming in at number 3, we got DeVonta Smith. Now, you're already seeing how this is mapping out. DeVonta Smith, man, I cannot say enough. Having him at 3 is not a knock on him at all. Having him at 3 is just showing how great this receiver class is. DeVonta Smith is a very, very underrated player. It seems like 2 months ago he was overrated, and now I think he's underrated. He's a guy who's a very just, if you just say, I want to show someone how to run routes, or I want to show someone how to be an NFL wide receiver, or, a wide receiver in general. He's just so smooth. He makes everything look so seamless. Every transition he makes between routes are so seamless. When he catches those screens, he's catching it and going. When he's running his slant routes, he's catching it and going. He's so good at running nuanced routes and using his brain as far as the game goes along to be able to turn those routes into routes that work off of routes he ran early on in that game and getting himself open. He's not the most athletic, crazy athlete, but I think his athleticism is underrated. I think he does have the speed, serious speed to play in the NFL and the speed to run away from people. He does have that ability to go up and high point the ball. He's consistently bracketed. They shift coverage. Once Jaylen Waddle went out, all the coverage went over to DeVonta Smith. He did it last year to a lesser extent, I think about 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns. And then this year he wins the Heisman and he gets 1,800 yards on 117 catches in a college season, and then 23 touchdowns. That is amazing. You do not put up those stats by accident. But moving on to my last thing, the only knock on DeVonta Smith is the fact that he's 175 and he might be lower than that. He might be lower. He might be around 160 something, and his stats might be a little bit inflated. Now, of course, I said you don't get these stats by accident, but he was throwing a lot of screens and he did have a lot of great blocking in front of him, and he got a lot of touchdowns that way. He got a lot of yards that way. And, of course, he got a lot of his 117 catches that way. So DeVonta Smith is a very, very underrated guy. But some of his stats you also have to look at with a grain of salt to know how he got those stats. My perfect comparison for him out of the bat is, people have pulled this up, but I just think it's such a great comparison. Marvin Harrison is the perfect comparison for DeVonta Smith. They both have those slender builds. DeVonta Smith is 6'1", 175. Marvin Harrison is 6 feet, 179. So there's not much difference between their height and weight. Marvin Harrison showed that you could do it over the long haul at that height and weight in a league where people say, linebackers were laying people out across the middle, safeties. We had Brian Dawkins and Sean Taylor and crazy guys hitting people going across the middle. And Marvin Harrison did it. He did it his whole career. I mean, slot, outside, it didn't matter where he lined up. He was always open and he was always dominant. It didn't matter what defenses did. He always found a way to get the ball. And I could really see DeVonta Smith having a similar career, catches-wise, stat-wise, as Marvin Harrison. So moving on to number 2. Jaylen Waddle, Alabama. We got 2 Alabama receivers back-to-back. And like I said, it's really tough to separate any of these receivers. But I think Jaylen Waddle and the next receiver, who you probably all have figured out by now, and if you watch my channel, you already know who the top receiver is. But staying with Jaylen Waddle, listen, the dude this year, he was injured. Last year, he wasn't that number one kind of target. This year, he was supposed to be that number one receiver who was going to take over, and he got an ankle injury. And even when he came back from the ankle injury, he was outrunning guys on one leg pretty much. But Waddle is 5'10", 185. He might be 5'11". He's not the biggest wide receiver. And when you look at him, he's all about the speed. It's all about the speed with this dude, elite speed, and it's really strong for someone who's his size. He really plays a lot bigger than what he looks. He's hard to take down in the open field usually, and he's someone who punishes people who try to take him down. Sometimes he's even like a running back in the open field. Controlled speed. I have controlled route runner because he's someone who can run very, very fast, who's someone who might rival like a 4.25 or something like that, but he can do it under so much control, and he can get to that 4.2 speed faster than anybody else on the field. He can run these routes faster than anybody else on the field because he can control his speed. It's not just long speed, it's short speed, it's all kinds of speed. It's just everything he does will be as fast as possible, and he's a quality route runner, which puts him above my comparison for him coming out of college by far. He's also great at high pointing the ball. He can go up and get the ball with the best of them in the NFL. I think he really can. On this next level, he's going to be able to go up and get the ball because he's got like a 40-something inch vertical. Hopefully the testing will show it. Hopefully his ankle is good. He might not run, he might not jump because of that ankle. But when it's time for him to play and he's all healed up, he's an explosive athlete going forward, running, going backward if he ever had to do that, and definitely jumping up. Moving on, the defense, whatever team he goes to, the defense is going to have to consistently change their coverage to making sure that they have someone as deep as possible. Because if you don't, he's going to outrun your entire coverage. He's that much of a threat to just outrunning your entire coverage with his speed, with his route running, with how quickly he can accelerate to catch even the fastest DBs off guard. Now, he's not the tallest. He's coming off of an injury. And those are really his biggest kind of problems is that he is coming off of this ankle injury. I expect it to heal, but as someone who has dealt with my own ankle injuries, I still have some issues. So that's going to be something to look at. I don't think it'll be much of a factor for him with all of that expensive rehab he's going to go through. I think he'll be 100% full go, and he is a literal guy. So even though he can jump, even though he can get 41 inches in the air, it doesn't really matter if you're in situations where you have a body on you and you can't necessarily jump with all of your might. There's some situations where he just will be too short to make some plays. So that's something you can think about, but those situations are very few and far between, especially when most of the time he has yards of separation. And the pro comparison, you all saw this comment, is Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is probably one of the top 3 or 4 wide receivers in the league. People will never give him his credit because he is just seen as a guy who's just fast. But Tyreek Hill has gotten better as a route runner, and I think Jaylen Waddle coming out might be as good of a route runner as Tyreek Hill is right now as a veteran in the league. Tyreek Hill, we all know he's in a perfect situation with the quarterback, with the offense, and I expect Jaylen Waddle to be as good or better than Tyreek Hill, especially by this time in Jaylen Waddle's career, 4, 5, 6 years in the future. he has this kind of potential, this kind of explosiveness. He just has to stay healthy. They're both guys who are physical, who are hard to take down and play bigger than what their actual size is. So before I get to my number one wide receiver, you all know who it is at this point, so I'm not going to ask you to predict, but type in the comments what your pro comparisons are for these wide receivers I've named. Do you like the pro comparisons I made up with? And what's your pro comparison for the number one wide receiver? Who is JaMarr Chase? Of course, JaMarr Chase is the number one wide receiver on this board. It's not a game. It's not a joke. He's 6 foot, 208, 84 catches, 20 touchdowns, 1,780 yards, which is almost 40 catches less than what DeVonta Smith did this year, what he did this year, and still almost the same yards and 3 less touchdowns. So it shows you how impactful he was every time he touched the ball, how many big plays he made, how many more plays down the field he made than DeVonta Smith, which is why I believe that his season is still just a little bit more impressive than DeVonta Smith, even though they both have all-time great seasons. But when you get down to it, JaMarr Chase is just a physical receiver. He screams physicality, and he has the speed to go along with it, and he has the route running to go along with it. He's probably the best high point receiver in this draft. He's probably the best. I mean, if you get rid of Kyle Pitts, and if you get rid of Kyle Pitts, he's definitely the best high point type of receiver in this draft. He's the best after the catch. He is an absolute yak monster. He's like Golden Tate with the ball in his hands. Some of the best yak receivers you've ever seen. He can literally do it all. He can be that slot receiver for you if you need it. He can be an X receiver. He can be pretty much everywhere you want to line him up. He can play outside and beat that press coverage, because if you try to press a guy like this, he's going to turn into a physical game, and more than often, he will win that physical game. If you don't want to press him, he still can be physical with you and still turn it into a physical game, or he can just run past you. So there's a lot of ways that JaMarr Chase can beat you. Moving on. He's got the perfect NFL size. And as I said about DeVonta Smith, he's consistently bracketed. He's consistently has, coverage rolled to his side. And he still came through successfully over and over and over again, able to beat that coverage. Now, when you look at things that might be a downside for JaMarr Chase's game, you can say that he opted out. So you could say that the year might have been kind of a one-year wonder kind of year. People would have loved to see what he had done this year without the first overall pick at quarterback throwing him the ball. But I'm not very concerned about, what would happen this year. He opted out. There's no way we can know what would have happened this year. And also, he does have speed. I believe he is a 4.4 guy, and there's been reports that he's faster now than he was his last time in college, because he's been training specifically to get faster and stronger. So he might even be bigger than the 208 that I have listed here. But he does not have that 4.3 speed. I don't think he's a guy who's consistently the 4.3 guy who's consistently just running through defenses with just his speed. But he does have enough speed to make those huge plays, which brings me to my comparison, which I believe is a perfect comparison. I'm going to be able to go a little bit more deep because this is my team. So Hakeem Nicks is my comparison for JaMarr Chase. Now, they're both – Hakeem Nicks comes in at 6'1", 208. So very similar builds. Very, very extremely similar builds. Hakeem Nicks was a guy who ran a 4.6 at the combine, but we all saw him play faster than that every single play. He wasn't the crispest route runner. JaMarr Chase probably has him beat in that category. But when Hakeem Nicks got the ball in his hands, the play just started. He was stronger than the people that he was playing against. He would be able to out-physical guys when the ball was in the air to be able to come down with everything. And even though Hakeem Nicks was 6'1", he rivaled guys who were 6'4", 6'5" in the NFL for how he could go up and get the ball. He was one of the best fade route receivers in the entire NFL, and he was always a threat to score. Even though he ran that 4.6, and probably his on-field speed is close to a 4.4, 4.5, he always found a way to make those plays happen when he got the ball in his hands. I always think of that play in the playoffs against the Atlanta Falcons where he caught the ball in the middle of the field, split the entire defense, and just, scored on like a 40, 50-yard touchdown. So you guys let me know what you think. These are my top 5 receivers. These are my comparisons. Let me know if I changed your mind today, or if you can change my mind in the comments for how I have these people ranked. Do you think that Terrace Marshall should be at number 5 instead of Toney? Let me know. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I put a little bit of extra work into the editing, and have a good one. So if you made it this deep into the video, I'm calling you a D6 squad member. If you're a D6 squad member, you got to hit that subscribe button. You got to turn on that notification bell. And listen, I make all kinds of content for NFL teams. So if you're not a Giants fan, don't worry. I'll cover your team. If I'm not covering your team, let me know. And have a good one.